good day, everybody. Welcome to the Lifetime Training Podcast. And I am excited to bring you a guy who's absolutely blowing up and has some of the best content on social media and that's out there right now, Mr. Ben Azadi. He's founder of Keto Kamp. God, man, he's got just a boatload of background knowledge and really bringing you the proper way to do things that people don't do properly is kind of the way I put it. Things like intermittent fasting, we're going to talk about today, keto, obviously, inflammation, and, just a bunch of stuff so that you get it straight from the horse's mouth on, and get really, really good content. So thank you for everything you've done. He's also got an amazing podcast called Keto Kamp Podcast. He's got a book called Keto Flex. I highly recommend. And he's known as the health detective because he's able to sift through a lot of the BS that's out there and really give you great knowledge. So thanks again for joining the show, Ben.
Jason, I'm grateful to be here with you and your audience. So thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Well, I want to start with a quote and it's with regard to your book, the Keto Flex. And it says, "This book is a true answer to the growing number of people who cannot lose weight, who've hit a weight plateau, have low energy or brain fog, or just want to take care of their health and take it to the next level." And so would you mind just, in the beginning, just talk about Keto Flex and, how you came about that and the reason why you really kind of went after that?
Yeah, great quote, great question. So I love keto. I think it's an amazing ancient healing strategy. Ancient meaning ketosis has been around since humans have existed. There's nothing new about it. Every single one of our ancestors, they used this tool called ketosis, keto. And I love it as a very powerful way to teach the body to use a different energy system, the fat burning energy system, which is a very efficient, clean source of energy. But I also understand that we don't want to be dogmatic with our thinking, especially when it comes to diet and nutrition. So keto flexing is the principle of really just teaching somebody how to develop metabolic flexibility, which is the ultimate goal. Because yes, our ancestors all did keto. That is a fact. However, whenever they had the opportunity to eat carbohydrates, they took that opportunity and they flexed out of ketosis, which is the premise behind keto flexing. So it's such a powerful way to reduce inflammation in the body. And when you reduce inflammation in your body, it could only help any symptom you might be dealing with, because when we use the word inflammation, I'm referring to cellular membrane inflammation. The membrane is what protects your DNA, it protects your cells. It is the actual intelligence of your cells. And that's what communicates with your DNA to turn on genes, turn off genes. And when you could reduce inflammation at that membrane level, when you use keto and keto flexing, it's going to help your hormones communicate better. It's going to help the nutrients you're supplementing with, the foods you're eating, do a better job, and you're just going to overall feel better. So whether that's brain fog or obesity or autoimmune disease or whatever condition or symptom, by reducing inflammation with keto flexing, you're going to be able to get your body in that right direction.
Awesome. And you said some things too. I think a lot of people, but I don't want to assume in the training world, understand inflammation as it relates to, I shouldn't say understand it, but knows the difference between inflammation. I'm inflamed and I've got kind of some type of inflammation in my joint or something like that, all the way down to the cellular side and how it causes, almost every disease in the human body. And I know that you went through FDN and I went through it as well. And the one thing that like absolutely dumbfounded me was the whole steroid hormone pathway and how the precursors to the steroid hormones are cholesterol, the bad cholesterol. And then he talked about, Reed back in the day talked about, if you have inflammation and you blame cholesterol, it's like blaming a fire truck, for the fire. And would you mind just explaining that? Because it was just so impactful to understand, the impact that inflammation has on cholesterol.
Oh yeah, so true. And that quote is right on by Reed Davis. It's not the cholesterol that's the problem, meaning it's not the firefighter at the fire. It's the reason they're there. And the reason they're there is because of inflammation. So when I mentioned the cell membrane, and I'm going to relate this to the conversation of fat and hormones, especially sex hormones. When we think about the cell membrane, it is what's called a lipid bilayer. Lipid meaning fat, and bilayer meaning it's a layer of fat around the cells. It's made of protein, saturated fat, and cholesterol. Saturated fat and cholesterol, those two bad words in the conventional medical systems, but it's imperative for your cell membranes to have quality cholesterol, quality saturated fats. It makes your sex hormones, like that whole cascade of hormones that you're speaking about, it's built from cholesterol. Cholesterol builds our sex hormones. It's the starting point. So if you deprive yourself of healthy quality fats and cholesterol in food, you're essentially depriving your body from functioning the way that it's designed to function. The brain begins to starve, the sex hormones begin to dysfunction, and then all of a sudden it's a cascade of other problems that could be far downstream, like having weight loss resistance, having brain fog, having autoimmune disease. This could be so far down removed going upstream, but when you correct the upstream cause, everything downstream starts to take care of itself and regulate. So we need to eat quality fat. Saturated fats are actually the most beneficial fat because if you look at the chemical structure of it, it contains no double bonds. It's a saturated fat, meaning it's stable. Now, the bad fats are polyunsaturated fats, which contain double bonds, which gives it more opportunity to oxidize and become inflammatory. But you don't have this problem with saturated fat. So we want to eat it to support our cells, to support the membrane, and to support our hormones.
Awesome. And you mean, and it kind of went to me, you mean cholesterol meds are probably the most prescribed, and then second, well, maybe those blue pills that they came out with. So it just, when you put those two things together, that says, okay, so I'm going to lower all your cholesterol. Then I'm going to give you a blue pill to make sure that you can work right. But yet those things are the things that are causing
it's crazy.
The problem to begin with. It's just like, how does a regular doctor how come we don't hear this? It just blows me away. So I think that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
So getting into this now, I love, I mean, you've had some amazing content and I want to get back into the keto side, but I also want to talk briefly about intermittent fasting and, the pros and cons of intermittent fasting and people say there's, different ways for men versus females and, there's all the different ratios. Would you mind talking about, intermittent fasting kind of on a high level?
Intermittent fasting is another ancient healing strategy that's been around just like ketosis since humans have existed. And the problem with this day and age, Jason, as you have seen, I'm sure with your clients, we're eating too often, too frequently. The average person, the average American is eating about 17 to 23 times per day. And when I say that, I mean, think about all the snacking, the grazing, the handful of almonds, the protein bar, the protein shake, the kombucha. I mean, even if it's healthy, it's still a meal to the body. Anytime you raise glucose and insulin and start that digestive process, it's a meal to the body. And the average American is doing that 17 to 23 times per day. They're never in a fasted state. They're never in this lean state where they get to tap into their body fat and do some repairing and cleansing. That's very important. There's a lot of benefits that take place when we practice intermittent fasting. First of all, there's research that shows what it does to reset your digestive system. When we think about eating a meal, it takes massive amounts of energy, resources, and blood flow to process a meal. And if you're not fasting, you're taking a lot of that energy and resources to digest the meal versus other ways to heal the body, other processes to heal the body. It's determined that the average standard American diet meal takes about 14 to 18 hours to process that meal. So if you're not fasting for 14 to 18 hours, what's going to happen? You create this backlog and you overwork your digestive system, leading to leaky gut, which is all over the place, leading to autoimmune disease, leading to a whole bunch of problems. So when you fast, it's one of the best ways to reset the gut. There's research from MIT that shows a 24-hour water fast strengthened intestinal stem cells in mice. I wrote about that in the book. But one of the most important benefits to fasting is autophagy. And that word autophagy, the Greek definition of autophagy means eat thyself. And this is how smart the human body is. We have this innate intelligence that sits within that cell membrane that is eager to work for us. It's an inner physician, an inner doctor, inner healer, if you will. And there's nothing greater than that innate intelligence. There's no pill, no surgery, no shot, no medication that could replace the innate intelligence. So when you fast, you harness this innate intelligence through this process called autophagy. And here's how it works. There's cells inside of our bodies that have these expiration dates on them, kind of like a refrigerator. We open up the refrigerator, there's groceries that all have an expiration date on them, the milk, the cheese, the produce. You got to get rid of those groceries at some point, because if you leave them in the fridge after they expire, it turns bad and it creates disease in that fridge. Same thing with the human body. We have cells, proteins, mitochondria that have expiration dates on them. Autophagy is the process of surveillancing, having this innate intelligence, surveillance cells that are expiring, getting rid of those cells or cleaning up those cells, and kind of like cleaning out that fridge. And that happens during a fast. That happens during strength training, during exercise. So it's great to kind of do both. But fasting is one of the best ways to turn on autophagy, reset the body. It's like nature's reset button. There's so many benefits to it.
And so is there a recommendation that you have on the fast? And then second, is there a difference? Should there be a difference male to female?
So I like to change I like to rotate the fasting schedule. I think most people could benefit by doing a daily 18-6 schedule, meaning 18 hours fasted, 6 hours eating, as long as you're eating enough in your window. If you're more active and doing a lot of heavy training, you might want to shorten that window. If you are not getting good sleep and you're very stressed out, you might want to shorten that window of fasting, just because fasting is a stress to the body, but it's a positive stress. But if you have a lot of stress and you're excessively training and doing too much fasting, it could be too much stress for your body to adapt to. So 18-6 is good. I like to throw in a 24-hour fast, maybe every week or every other week, to get that really gut healing and cleansing. Should women practice fasting differently than men? Absolutely, 100%. They should do keto and fasting both differently than men. Women and men have the same hormones, but we have different amounts and different cycles of those hormones. So women, especially, let's say menstruating women who have a monthly cycle, they want to be really cognizant of their fasting schedule and make sure they're actually not fasting the week leading up to their period, because they want to build progesterone that week, and you don't build progesterone with fasting. So that's a week where women who have a menstrual cycle, 7 days before, you don't want to fast. And men could do a little bit more aggressive with fasting, because we have a 24-hour hormone pattern. Cycling women have a 28-day pattern. So yeah, that's just one example of how men and women should do it differently.
Perfect. And is there an hour difference for the female, or you still stay with the 18-6?
I like an 18-6 for females too, as long as they're not doing it that week before their period.
Got it. And then on the 24-hour fast, is it just straight water, no coffee, no nothing, or what do you recommend there?
If you want to get the most benefits from that 24-hour fast, then just water and some electrolytes. Mm-hmm. With that being said, if you want to have some coffee and tea, you're still going to get most of the benefits. It's not going to negate it. If it's going to help you keep that fast going, then I'm all for it.
Got it. Perfect. And so is intermittent fasting part of the Keto Flex, or are those two kind of done separately?
So there's 4 pillars, Jason, in the book Keto Flex that I talk about. The first pillar is called adapt, simply getting your body fat adapted, getting you in ketosis. After you do that, which takes about 7 to 14 days, getting you into ketosis with no side effects. After we do that, then we move into the second pillar, which is called fast, because it's named after intermittent fasting strategy. So then we practice fasting variations. After that, which is another 14, 28 days, we move into the phase pillar, which is the third pillar. That is practicing actually carnivore. We're phasing out all carbohydrates, all anti-nutrients for 30 to 60 days and doing carnivore. Then we have earned that badge to start keto flexing, which is the fourth pillar. So in keto flexing, we do practice fasting, to answer your question. So it goes hand in hand with it. Keto and fasting and keto flexing all just gel very good together. They both do a good job at reducing inflammation, reducing insulin, resetting the body. So those are in general the 4-pillar structure, but we want to make sure we do the work before we start flexing in and out of ketosis.
Got it. And is there a risk population, that might have these X, Y, and Z things that you would say, hey, obviously before you go on any diet, you got to go through the recommendations, but are there people that might, want to consider staying away or just have extra help, somebody focusing on, what the heck they're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So if you have a history of an eating disorder or active eating disorder, I do not recommend any fasting. You got to work with a professional before and tread very, very lightly once you start doing it. If you are underweight, malnourished, you probably don't want to do any fasting. You need more growth, more what's called mTOR. If you're under the age of 18, you're in a growth phase. You don't want to do much fasting. That doesn't mean you have to snack all day, just you don't want to do much fasting. Those are considerations now. If you're pregnant as well, you don't want to do much fasting. You want to give the baby nutrition. Breastfeeding, you probably don't want to do too much fasting because you don't want to dry out your milk supply. Now, if you're type 2 diabetic, insulin resistant, then this fasting and keto are two of the best ways to reverse that. However, I do recommend monitoring your glucose and ketone numbers to make sure, because as you get healthier and make your hormones more sensitive, if you're taking insulin or taking a blood sugar reducing medication, you want to work with your doctor to continuously decrease the dosage as you get healthier. Because if you're getting healthier by doing keto and fasting and you're already taking insulin, it could make you hypoglycemic. So those are considerations. Here's the cool thing, Jason, whatever medical condition or symptom you're dealing with, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them out there, keto and fasting done the right way will only benefit you, because if you could reduce inflammation at the cellular level, it's only going to help your condition. With that being said, I do recommend you work with a health practitioner to kind of guide you to make sure you have more of a custom structure versus doing it by yourself. And this is not medical advice, but it can be done. And it's one of the best ways to reverse these conditions mentioned.
Got it. Got it. You mentioned something as you were talking about diabetes. It says nobody dies from diabetes. They die from the degenerative diseases connected to it. It's a quote from the beginning of the book. Would you mind going into that as we're, talking about diabetes?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I should change that to it's rare to die from diabetes, because there are some cases where somebody will go into a diabetic coma and die. That's very rare. So when I say nobody dies from diabetes, it should more accurately say it's very rare to die from diabetes. Now, the reason I say that is because diabetes leads, the degeneration of diabetes leads to the degeneration of health. So diabetes leads to heart disease, heart attacks and strokes. Diabetes leads to amputations. It leads to kidney failures. It leads to these conditions that end up killing the person. It's not the actual diabetes that kills the person 98, 99% of the time. It's what it leads to. So I saw that with my dad. My dad had type 2 diabetes, and he had it for a very long time since I was a kid. And as an adult, he ended up suffering a massive stroke, which left him paralyzed. And then eventually 9 months later, he lost his life. So I saw it firsthand with my dad, and somebody's listening right now, they probably have seen it with their family member. It's not the diabetes, it's what it leads to. So if we could correct the diabetes, we could correct that from ever happening again, those devastating health conditions like the heart attacks and the strokes and the amputation. So I love a quote from Einstein. Einstein said, "Intellectuals solve problems, geniuses prevent them." We want to be geniuses here and be proactive, not reactive. That's the point here.
That's great. One other thing that we talked about briefly with regard to cholesterol, and we're bouncing a little bit, but we'll be able to fix that, is, there's people that have high cholesterol, but their triglycerides are fine, their blood sugar is fine, but yet docs still continue to say, well, I think you really need to take, that medicine, to be able to, the statin, can you explain, maybe why, maybe what you've seen, some reasons and why, people just blame it on genetics? Is it solely that, or what else is going on there? And is it a risk still if you have, let's say a 300 cholesterol where, your HDLs, your better ones are, say, in the high 50s or 60s, but everything else is okay?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because I get that question a lot on my YouTube channel. My doctor says I have high cholesterol. I've been doing keto for a month or two, and he wants to prescribe a statin. Total cholesterol does not mean a damn thing. I mean, you know that, Jason, because cholesterol is that Band-Aid that's healing the body. So when we think about like just the study of research out there, more people have died with heart disease, heart attacks and strokes with normal to low cholesterol than those with high total cholesterol. Like, come
That's
on.
bananas.
So it's not the total cholesterol,
Yeah.
it's the inflammation.
Mhm.
So we don't want to just look at total cholesterol. If you have 300, okay, it might be a little elevated, but let's look at the other markers. What about your HDL, which you mentioned, high density lipoprotein? It's very protective. We want to see that between like 50 and 90. That's a good range right there. Your LDL cholesterol also needs to be split up into two different parts to give you more of an accurate measurement. But I like looking at HDL and triglycerides. Triglycerides could be considered an inflammatory marker. It's usually there. It's usually high because of carbs, fructose, processed foods, vegetable oils. But we want to see your triglycerides under 100, even better, between like 30 and 70. Then we want to take your triglycerides divided by your HDL and see if you have a ratio of less than 2. If you do, even better, less than 1.5, you're at very low risk of a heart disease, even if your total cholesterol is high. With all of that, you also want to look at some inflammatory markers, your high sensitivity C-reactive protein. We want to see that under 1. Homocysteine, we want to see that below 7. Looking at the full picture and having this conversation with your doctor trying to prescribe a statin will give you a much better outcome, because it's not just total cholesterol. It's not as easy as that. It's all of these moving parts. It's all of the markers I mentioned and a few others. I mean, if your fasting insulin is over 10, you are at risk. If your A1C is over 5.5, you are at risk. But those doctors are not looking at all of that, but you should, and you should have that conversation with your doctor.
Fantastic. It also kind of, it boils down to, when I was looking at it, and there's so many people out there that worry about the cholesterol in the food and say, the egg yolk or whatnot. And, some people know this, some people don't. Would you mind explaining why the cholesterol in the food might not necessarily be the reason why your cholesterol is high?
Yeah, there's been so many experiments, and somebody could give it a try. They could like eat a whole bunch of high cholesterol foods, don't change anything else, and look at their serum cholesterol, and they'll see it stays the same. And they're wondering why I'm eating all this cholesterol. The body will balance it out. It's not really the cholesterol that you're eating in the food. That's important for sex hormones and other functions, but it's not really an issue. There's been experiments where somebody would have like, I think 15, 20 eggs a day for 30 days and didn't even change their total cholesterol. The liver actually manufactures cholesterol, and the body will reach that homeostasis. If you see bad cholesterol go up, LDL, small particles, LDL, that's not because of the food you're eating, unless it's like rancid fats. It's because of inflammation. So it's not, let's take the attention away from the cholesterol we're eating and focus on the inflammation. That should be the conversation.
So is it safe to say then it could be the egg that your body's not agreeing with that's causing inflammation, not necessarily the cholesterol from it?
Yeah, that's a good point. So if you have a sensitivity to egg and you're eating a whole bunch of eggs, it could be inflammatory, and then it could change your lipid profile. Yeah, that's a fair point, Jason.
Sweet. Another thing too that you've seen some just great content on is the whole concept of fats, good fats versus bad fats. And would you mind explaining to the audience, which ones they should be cooking with, which ones they shouldn't be, which ones they should be just staying away from altogether?
Yeah, great question. This is the most important thing for people to understand, whether you're doing keto or not. These fats, and there's 8 of them, they're called the Hateful 8 by Dr. Kate Shanahan. I'm going to list them all soon. But these fats, they're worse than sugar. They're worse than smoking cigarettes in terms of leading to disease. Because at least your body could burn off sugar, high glucose, by exercise and training and just walking. You can't burn off these fats. This is a great question at the right time, because I've been doing a lot of research on it. And they're called omega-6 fats, linoleic acid. The half-life, I'm looking at my notes here, the half-life for this bad fat, linoleic acid, in our cell membranes is 600 to 680 days, which is about 2 years. Meaning, and I'm going to list the fats soon because you're wondering what they are. If you eat these fats, bad fats, and you get rid of them today, in 2 years, half of them will still be in your cell membranes. In 4 years, they'll be completely gone. So
that is bananas.
Isn't that crazy? So they are inflammatory. The reason they're inflammatory, I mentioned it earlier, is because they're polyunsaturated fats. Poly means many. many double bonds. The more double bonds a fat has in their chemical structure, the more oxygen it attracts. The more oxygen it attracts, the more oxidative it is. Think of biting into an apple and leaving it on the counter, turns brown. That's kind of what's happening at the cellular level with these bad fats. So we want to avoid, here are the hateful eight, 3 C's: canola, corn, cottonseed. 3 S's: soybean, safflower, sunflower. And then we have rice bran oil, and we have grapeseed oil. Those are the hateful 8. We want to make sure we're doing an audit. They're not in your kitchen. They're not in your cupboard, your pantry. You're not giving them to your kids. We want to swap those for monounsaturated fats and even better saturated fats. These are the better options: olive oil, coconut oil, grass-fed butter, grass-fed ghee, and probably the best is beef tallow, 100% grass-fed beef tallow, and duck fat. Those are stable saturated fats. They don't have that opportunity to oxidize because there's no double bonds. We want to make sure we're doing that, because keto, a lot of people do keto, but they do dirty keto and they're getting these inflammatory fats. That will lead to more disease than sugar, and even some say smoking cigarettes.
I think that's probably, you didn't mention avocado oil. Where is that?
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's on the good side. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I had no idea. And that is whether it's stuff that you're cooking with or stuff that you see on the label. So if you're eating a, organic tortilla chip,
Yeah.
but it's
They
got
probably
sunflower,
have a bad fat.
Yeah, it's probably got a bad fat, and that'll kill you. Wow. That's awesome. With regards to coffee in general, I seen some stuff that you've talked about, and I thought it was great just on when should you have it? When should you probably not, stay away from it? And overall, is it the coffee that's bad? Is it the caffeine that's bad? What do you have on that?
Coffee can be great. If you could find yourself a clean source of organic coffee that has been tested for heavy metals and mold, and it has none of that, it could be super healing, anti-inflammatory, helps the liver. So as long as you don't overdo it, right? At 1 to 2 cups a day. The best time to have your cup of coffee, or anything with caffeine, I should say, it could be tea or even a supplement. The best time to have it is about an hour and a half after you wake up in the morning. The reason we don't want to have the coffee first thing in the morning is because when you wake up in the morning, your body is raising cortisol. It's really high in the morning, but should be in range, but it's higher in the morning. And cortisol is a very powerful hormone, and it's much, much more powerful than caffeine. So when you have your cup of coffee first thing in the morning, cortisol will just render that caffeine useless. It'll just increase your tolerance, leading you to want more coffee, more stimulation, more a 4-hour energy drink, Red Bull, etc. But when you wait an hour and a half, that's when cortisol begins to taper down naturally. And then you have your cup of coffee. You get much more bang for your buck, much more sustainable energy levels for the rest of the day. Now, I know this is blasphemy to a lot of people. How am I going to wait an hour and a half? I'm going to punch somebody in the face. Start low and slow. Maybe you start by waiting 15 minutes and then 20 minutes and kind of building up. But you're going to notice a big difference once you make that switch.
And it's probably, if you're like that, it's probably a reason why you should probably go on the 24-hour fast.
Bingo. You probably need it more than anybody else.
I think my wife actually's got in our cupboard. I drink coffee for your sake, or something like that. Oh boy,
that's good,
man. Well, I'd love to swing it back, and you talk in your Keto Flex about interference, and what the goals of really Keto Flex are, and you've got identify interference, remove interference, and then allow your body to heal. I'd love to kind of wrap it up and talk about those things and kind of what you mean by that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Jason, good job to you with your research. I've been on a lot of podcasts. I've been interviewing a lot of people, and I've been interviewed by a lot of people. And I could tell when somebody interviews me if they've actually done research with, just the way you prepared yourself and your questions, and you've done research. So kudos to you, because not a lot of people do that when I'm being interviewed. And I'm like you, I'm that kind of host that wants to do research. So kudos to you first and foremost.
Thank you.
Those are the 3 steps right there. It's very easy on paper, those 3 steps, but when you actually are doing the work, it could be very difficult. So 3 steps to healing your body. That's it. Identify interference, number 1. Number 2, work on removing the interference. And number 3, allow your incredible body to heal. Sounds so simple, but when we talk about identifying interference, that's hard to do because it's usually not just one thing. It can be multiple things. Here's an example. Having silver fillings in your mouth, that's a big interference. I had mercury poisoning by having 8 silver fillings in my mouth. I also lived in a home that had mold growing in the attic that I didn't even know about. That is interference. Having chemicals in your cleaning supplies, in your shower, and having that hit your head every day, interference. So what we want to do is identify those interferences, work on removing it. And when you remove the interference, then the innate intelligence could do its job and begin to heal your body. The challenge is finding the interference. So what we do here at Keto Kamp is to help individuals find the interference, identify it, and work on removing it. And once you do that, the body is so amazing. It is capable of healing no matter what you're dealing with. When we think about symptoms, symptoms are not the problem. Being obese, not the problem. When I was obese, I never had a weight problem. Nobody has a weight problem. It is a weight symptom. Cancer is a symptom. What is the cause? The cause is finding the interference and working on removing it. Then you get to reverse these symptoms.
And in a lot of what you said has nothing to do with food. It has nothing to do. I mean, those are probably in there, but it's the stuff going around the house that, we just take for granted and we think, okay, it's nothing. And that could be the problem is what you're saying.
That's correct. And you know what the most insidious interference is that nobody's aware of? Those 60,000 thoughts that we think every single day. The stinking thinking, Jason. Yeah. If your thinking is thinking, your dreams are shrinking, man.
Oh, I love it. And that's, it's so funny for the trainers out there, again, I've been at it for a while and, things change. I always say when I first started in training, everybody was a bodybuilder. It was back in the early 90s. And, then it kind of morphed into people doing corrective and then, nutrition, you couldn't say anything about it. And now obviously that's changed. And, now it's this behavior, mentality, mindfulness, and just getting this between your head. I have the conversation with my kids. It's like the older you get, especially in sport or in anything, the more it's between your head and all the noise that you have. And in corporate environments, I work at one, it's how do I get rid of the noise so I can move forward and get what you want? And, one of the things that I had him on a podcast a while back, his name, he wrote a book called Start Here, Mastering the Lifelong Art of Well-Being. And his name's Nate Klemp. And one of the things they talked about was the happiness set point and how we have a weight set point, but there's a set point for our happiness. And you see that with people who win the lottery and then, they're happy for a while and then they come back to, however they were. And he talks about 4 things. One, we live in a negativity bias, like our brains are built for the negative. So understanding and knowing that, and then resistance and identifying, which is basically the BS that we tell ourselves to justify the situation we're in or what we do or don't want to do. And then judgment, judging ourselves, and then attachment, staying attached to the past and not being able to move forward. And those 4 things culminate to your happiness set point. And I think those 4 things also go back to exactly what you just said, is the 60,000 thoughts that are going between your head that we don't even know are going on until we can identify them. So, there's so much out there. This human body is just a baffling machine. And I always say what's right today is wrong tomorrow. What's wrong tomorrow is right today. Just, try to do your best to stay sane, man. So, one last thing too, if you've got a minute, and I forgot to talk about this, was another thing that I thought was great, was the George Costanza effect. And would you mind diving into what you mean by that?
Yeah, I got this analogy from my colleague, Dr. Jason Fung, who wrote an excerpt in my book. Brilliant man. Yeah. So the George Costanza effect. For those who don't know, George Costanza was a very popular character on a sitcom called Seinfeld. I used to love Seinfeld. And there was an episode on Seinfeld where George Costanza had an idea. You see, George Costanza on every episode was a miserable man. He was unhappy. He was unhealthy. He was broke. He was living with his parents. He was getting poor results in his life. So on this one episode, he had a brilliant idea of, all right, what I'm doing is not working for me. What I've been taught is not working for me. I'm going to do the exact opposite of everything I've been doing up until this point. For example, he would go to a restaurant and see a woman sitting at the bar of a restaurant, and walk up to her. And in the past, he would make up all these lies to try to impress her, but he said, opposite. So he was completely honest with her. Hey, I'm George Costanza. He would take off his hat. I'm bald. I live with my parents. I'm broke. Nice to meet you. And she'd look him up and down and say, hey, George, come sit down next to me. So it worked. And then he would do everything differently. Instead of ordering a chicken salad, he would order a big salad. He would order different foods, and everything in his life started to improve the minute he did everything opposite of what he has been taught up until that point. So what does this mean? When we look at what the government teaches us, when we look at what mainstream media teaches us, when we look at what's being posted on our social media feeds, if we do the complete opposite of what mainstream is telling us to do, the George Costanza effect, you're going to get better results in life. Here's a great quote from Alvin Toffler. He said, the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read and write. It is those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. A lot of what we've been taught, we need to unlearn and then relearn and practice that George Costanza effect.
And I think it was a perfect ending, and just way to wrap it up. So, guys out there, ladies, you have to go follow Ben. He's at the Ben Azadi on Instagram. He's got a LinkedIn, Facebook, and on the website, he's got a YouTube channel. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes. Go out and buy the book, Keto Flex, and just be open. That's the biggest thing. And I think what you were saying at the end is be open to new stuff. Don't get dogmatic in, what was done in the past, especially if you've had this cycle of going over and over and over again, or you have clients that have this cycle of going over and over and getting the same exact result over and over again. We know that's the definition of insanity. So
yep.
Anything else you want to leave the audience with, man? Thanks again.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Jason. You're doing awesome work. If you guys found this valuable, I'd love for you, to connect with you. Like Jason said, I'm all over social media. I have my Keto Kamp podcast. If you want to get my book to really deep dive into the 4 pillars, it's on sale right now on Amazon. If you go to ketoflexbook.com, and I am 5 chapters down in recording the audiobook. So that'll be out hopefully in Audible if you're more of an audio type of person. But benazadi.com is my website. Just keep identifying the interference, work on removing it, and your amazing body will heal. No matter if you're 18 years old or 98 years old, your body could heal. Just keep working on yourself, and you got this.
Man, thank you so much for your time and knowledge, and look forward to chatting again soon.
Likewise, Jason. Thank you.
Take care, man.